It's all about the money with Ntanta Makanya.
It's time to welcome a familiar voice to our airwaves, a friend of the show and a beacon of knowledge, calculators in the world of engineering. Joining us now is Dr. Andrew Dickson, the engineering executives at CBI-Electric, low voltage. Good evening, Dr. Dickson, and thank you for gracing us with your expertise once again.
Evening, Santa. Thank you for having me, and good to be here.
Tonight, we are diving into a topic that is sparking, I would say, electrifying conversations. Can IoT be the shock absorber we need to combat the cost of illegal power connections, Dr. Dickson?
And the answer is yes, it is potentially one of the tools we can use.
The solution.
So what I want to separate out here is there's two realms of IoT. The typical residential space of IoT, where the consumer, the homeowner has it. And then on the other side of it is the industrial side. So this is where we start to see the sort of emergence of technology that kind of goes above and beyond. It's more robust. It's designed for bigger systems. So typically our electrical distribution system. And it's, again, connected to the internet. So we are able to access the information wherever we are, as long as there's a connection. And this can be a tool that we can then start to understand what the network's doing and therefore start to combat things like illegal connections.
Maybe let's just go back there. I mean, for the ease of reference for our listeners, we're using an acronym IoT. Could you perhaps help us to understand what is Internet of Things?
So the Internet of Things is, we have the World Wide Web. People have access to that. That gives us some information. Now, if we go beyond this, because of the interconnectivity of things, the IoT sphere or space or definition came about when we started connecting devices. So the first obvious IoT device is our phone, right? So we went from a traditionally dumb phone that we had a fixed network that we communicated on to a smartphone. And then because it can connect to the internet, it can now use the tools available on the internet. So we were able to use browsers and then apps and et cetera like this. So that's where we started. Now, almost everything that we have in our lives, and again, this is obviously depending on who we are and where we are, has some sort of connectivity. So your fridge, for instance, could be connected to the internet. And what this can allow is that, in fact, when you go to your fridge and let's say you take out your milk and you finish your milk and you don't put it back in, your fridge can actually tell you the next time you're shopping, oh, by the way, you haven't got any milk. Don't forget to collect some. Now, it's an extreme example, but the basics is it's any device that is connected to the internet forms part of the network, which is the Internet of Things.
Internet of Things. We can even send now a message to your refrigerator to defrost some of your meat, and you can do so many things now with Internet of Things. Now, Dr. Dickson, as we peel back the layers of this complex issue we're talking about today, I want us to start with the fundamental wiring of the problem, which is your illegal connections. And they've been a thorn in the side of our electricity infrastructure for far too long. I mean, just now, there was a headline, in the business headline, that Durban businesses are appealing to the municipality not to hike electricity at this time. So it's definitely really a thorn in the side of our electricity infrastructure for far too long. Could you shed some light on the role of that municipalities and Eskom play in the electricity supply chain, and how these illegal connections are short-circuiting the system?
All right, now that's quite a load, so we'll kind of break it down. What I do want to reference is, again, in the news, did you see the story about Nigeria?
What about Nigeria?
Well, in Nigeria, the grid failed again. This is the fifth time this year the grid failed on Monday morning. All right? So they went into total blackout again. Now, remember, Nigeria is our competitor for one of the biggest economies in the African continent.
Between 1 and 2, yes.
Now, and at the same time, they've just published a hike of 230% tariff increase on high consumers. Now, again, you're trying to fix a hole that's already, or the dam is already burst, and now you're trying to get all the money you can to fix the hole, which, anyway. So let's come back to South Africa. Same thing is kind of existing here, particularly with the illegal connections. Now, there's two elements of this. One is, remember, way back, the government promised that we would power every single home, right? That was part of their rollout. This was an Eskom plan, and it started and was supposed to be completed in 2012. All right? So you've got to remember, I've been told I'm allowed to get electricity, or I will get electricity. So, of course, it's a basic service. So, at this point in time, if you're not going to do anything for me, I'm going to do something for me. Now, I'm not saying that's right. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying it's a problem because there are rules and regulations that define how we connect to the grid, what type of connection we make. And these now become hot topics and hot connections. And a hot connection is a very bad thing, obviously, besides the net heat effect, which can melt conductors, and that obviously leads to things like insulation failure, fires. Fires are a big problem, particularly in high-density areas, which is, again, we've seen in the news very often. There's a fire within informal environments, and those fires spread very, very quickly, which means a simple wrong event in one location can affect tens to hundreds to thousands of lives. And that is a bit of a problem. And this is where we've got to curtail things on the one side. On the other side of it is, of course, we've got an economy, and we need to grow this economy. And if we don't have the power, because we constantly have to load shed, we're going to have a problem in growing the entire country, not just business as such. Because remember, business puts money into the hands of the consumer. The hands of the consumer go out and buy things. That in turn puts more money into the bigger economy. And so everything begins to grow, businesses get established. And if we're now fundamentally going to the start of that, which at this point in time is electricity supply, and taking a portion of that away, we're going to have a problem. And that portion is not small anymore. So that's where our problem is that we're bleeding a lot of electricity, which we're generating just to unknown loads. If I don't know where it's going, I don't know what to do with it and how to fix it if it breaks. And that causes other problems. So this is a big, nuanced issue that we face, and we've got to learn how to resolve it, or we've got to find a way to resolve it, because otherwise what's going to happen is that Eskom's going to continue to generate or attempt to generate more and more power, but they're going to keep on losing it because they don't know where it's going. And as they lose more of it and they don't get the revenue in, I think I saw somewhere in some press today even, I think something like 97 billion is now owed to Eskom. I think I saw something in that line. And you're kind of going, how are we supposed to build the infrastructure? How are we supposed to build the next generation of power stations, whatever those may look like, if Eskom's not getting the revenue? So
it's a bad business move. Bad business move.
Totally agree with you there, Dr. Dickson. It's going to be difficult for Eskom to even supply because they're not too sure how much demand is out there. And if they allocate the demand, is it sufficient? We can't tell. All right, I guess we are witnessing a power struggle which is leaving us all in the dark. And in any case, now let's flip the switch on the financial aspect of this tangled web. I mean, after all, this is all about the money. The costs associated with illegal connections are not just watts and volts. They are kilowatts of financial burden. Dr. Dickson, help us then. Can you illuminate for us the staggering financial toll that these illicit hookups are taking on power utilities and municipalities at large?
All right. So, I mean, when we look at it, and as you said, this is all about the money. Where's the money going? If I have a business, and I'm going to give an example. If I have a business, let's say I'm making muffins, and I can make 10 muffins a day, but 3 of those muffins disappear without me getting any revenue for that. That's a bit of a problem to my business, right? And Eskom is in the same boat. So, Eskom's pretty much got unknown losses of about 30%. That's probably a variable amount and will change over time depending on where, what, and how. But, it kind of equates to about 15 million a day that they're losing in revenue around that. Again, give or take, these are rough numbers and are very difficult to quantify. But this becomes a lot of money. And if you think about this every day, this is bleeding out of your purse. How do you then take it to the next level? So we need to be able to account for where that is going and what's happening to it before we can say correct our behavior or say to everyone, listen, guys, we're going to load shed, which ultimately has obviously the bigger economic impact, but we're going to have to load shed because we simply don't have enough to meet the demand. So we need to start identifying where our pitfalls and gaps go. Now, again, Eskom knows a lot of this because they've had to do the calculations on transmission losses and generation losses because each of those have what we call technical losses. But it's the non-technical losses, those unknowns, those illegal connections. And again, a single illegal connection probably not going to do much. But one illegal connection becomes 20, becomes 200. And then in addition to that, I may have a single illegal connection, but then I have multiple houses, dwellings attached to that. So it's not just one, it's 1 times 5, it's 1 times 10. And again, that adds up very quickly.
I can imagine it does add up very quickly, and I think it seems like we are paying a high price for these hidden current flows beneath the surface as consumers. Am I correct to assume that, Dr. Dickson?
Well, of course we are. Now, listen, again, we have been very fortunate in this country to have what we would call relatively cheap electricity. However, now the floodgates are open, and what have we just seen going through an 18% increase? The tariffs of the municipalities from Eskom, etc., as well as additional surcharges on your sort of base network charge. So the consumer is paying a lot more. And they're kind of saying, well, guys, if I'm paying more, where am I getting my return?
For sure.
And the answer is simply, well, I'm paying for it. I want electricity. I need electricity to, again, either sustain my lifestyle or sustain my business. And if I can't have either, where do I go with that? So, guys, come to the party. You're asking for more money, and you're not giving me better service.
Yeah. Well, because then there you have it. When we come back, we are going to look at solutions. Seemingly, IoT could be a solution. It's been touted as a shining beacon. So we'll come back with that. Dr. Dickson is going to help us to understand. Maybe this could also be your solution at home. It's all about the money. In case you're wondering who's our special guest tonight, is now is not a stranger. Is Dr. Andrew Dickson, the engineering executive at CBI-Electric. Low voltage. Dr. Dickson is here to help us and dive into this topic, sparking conversations. Can IoT be the shock absorber? Initially, he did answer, but then let's just now zoom into it with him so that he can give us more understanding. Dr. Dickson, let's just plug into the future. Industrial IoT solutions have been touted as a shining beacon in the darkness of illegal power connections. Could you paint a picture for us of how these technological marvels could be the circuit breakers we need to prevent these unauthorized connections?
All right. So let's separate out 2 ideas here.
Sure.
One is we know we have these illegal connections, but we don't necessarily know always where they are. We don't have the resolution of the information where this power flow is going. And this is because primarily what Eskom does and what the likes of City Power does, etc., is they take a meter, it's a bulk meter, and we have incoming power from Eskom, which we know is, let's call it, a couple of gigawatt hours. And on the other side of that is we have the municipality, which is recording how much is consumed on their side. And at the end of the day, those 2 numbers should pretty much equate. Now, the problem is they don't. And this is obviously where we get the losses. And so what the industrial IoT side of things will start to enable for us is the data collection. Now, that's where Eskom needs to start. They need to say, I'm generating all this power, where is it actually going? So these devices can now be dispersed amongst the network, and that can be both at Eskom's level as well as within the cities, to understand exactly who's getting what power and when. Because again, very often your connections, particularly at any place of residence, dwelling, etc., is not going to be very high during the day because most people are probably not going to be there. But in the evenings, and that's obviously why we often see a lot more load shedding when it goes into the evenings, because suddenly everyone's at home, everyone's cooking, everyone wants light, they need energy to do what they're going to do. But so now, at that point in time, let's say half your people are not necessarily going to be at work because they work a typical 9-to-5 job. So this is where these smart devices that are connected start to enable us to visualize exactly what's happening in the evening. So they will sit and collect all this data. And the joys with them is because they're connected to the internet and they're continuously connected to the internet, they can continuously pull the data. So there are two things that now happen. One is we get a better picture of the overall consumption throughout the country, not just these high-level numbers, but these sort of very fine details much, much further down the network. And we can begin to pinpoint areas that then enable us to say, okay, we see that we're giving a lot of power to area A. However, we don't see the revenue coming out of area A. Why not? And then we can start to go deeper into that to say, well, is it a particular location? Is it the whole area? Is there a problem? I mean, this is not only about illegal connections, but this is also about damage to the system. And that can be through either inclement weather, that can be through intentional destruction of property. There are a number of reasons behind this, but if a power line goes down onto the ground, but doesn't actually cause a trip on the upstream breaker, that can just sit there pumping energy into the ground. And it's relatively speaking, in the grander scheme of things, not that big, but it's big enough to cause a problem if there are multiple events. Anyway, so now back to the IoT devices. So they're pulling data in real time. Now, the joys of this is it doesn't matter where you are around the country. It doesn't matter which Eskom office you're in. If you have access to the portal, you'll be able to see what my power consumption is doing. Okay, so that's on the one side. Then on the other side is I've got all this data, so what do I do with it? Now, for someone to go through this in an individual capacity becomes quite taxing because there is just so much data that can become available. I mean, some of these devices collect a piece of data every second. Now, if you consider how many seconds there are in a minute, in a day, and etc., and you've got thousands of these devices out in the field, it's going to be very difficult to start to pinpoint and understand what exactly is happening in my grid and my distribution system. So this is now where things like AI start to really become very useful.